I never thought I'd be here at 44 telling this story. That's the thing about life, isn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, just when you've accepted your routines and carefully constructed boundaries, something or someone comes along and completely shatters everything you thought you knew about yourself. It's been almost a year since I met Jacob. Sometimes I still catch myself staring at my reflection, wondering if the woman looking back at me is really the same Eleanor Summers, who spent 10 years in a marriage that slowly drained her spirit, who threw herself into her work as an executive assistant to avoid facing the emptiness at home, who had convinced herself that passion was something that belonged to younger women with fewer scars. "Since when do you take pictures, Eleanor?" he'd asked, barely looking up from his phone. I didn't have an answer then. I still don't, not really. Maybe I just needed to see something beautiful, to be reminded that the world existed beyond the glass and steel of San Francisco's financial district. The morning of the workshop, I arrived early, my brand new camera still in its box, feeling ridiculously out of place among the seasoned hikers with their weathered backpacks and confident strides. That's when I first saw Jacob. He was setting up some equipment by the trailhead, his messy brown hair catching the early morning sunlight. He couldn't have been more than 30, wearing a faded flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms tanned from countless days outdoors. When he looked up and smiled at me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. A flutter, a moment of possibility. It was terrifying. "First timer?" he asked, walking over to me. His voice was deeper than I expected, with a gentle, unhurried quality to it. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed, gesturing at my pristine hiking boots and the camera I was awkwardly trying to unbox. "Only in the best way," he said, taking the camera box from my hands. "There's nothing better than seeing Yosemite through fresh eyes. I'm Jacob, by the way. I'll be your guide for the weekend." "Eleanor," I replied, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing as our fingers briefly touched. The workshop was a small group, just 8 of us following Jacob through hidden trails and breathtaking vistas. I watched him as he patiently explained aperture settings and composition techniques, the way he'd sometimes pause mid-sentence, captivated by a sudden shift in light across the valley or the appearance of a deer in a distant clearing. He moved through the landscape with such natural ease, as if he and the mountains shared some secret language. By the end of the first day, my professional armor, the one I'd carefully constructed over years in corporate America, had begun to crack. Jacob had a way of looking at you when you spoke, really looking, as if your words mattered more than anything else in that moment. It had been so long since someone had truly listened to me that I'd forgotten how intoxicating it could be. We were the last 2 at the campfire that night. The others had retreated to their tents, but I couldn't bring myself to end the day, to break the spell of starlight and conversation. Jacob was telling me about a sunrise he'd photographed in Patagonia, his hands animatedly tracing the contours of mountains in the firelight. "Sorry," he said suddenly, catching himself mid-story. "I tend to ramble about these things." "Don't apologize," I said. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk about something they love." He studied me for a moment, the flames casting shadows across his face. "And what do you love, Eleanor?" The question caught me off guard. What did I love? I'd been so busy being efficient, being reliable, being everything for everyone else that I'd stopped asking myself that question years ago. "I used to love dancing," I admitted, surprising myself. "Not professionally or anything, just moving to music without caring how I looked." "Used to?" "Life gets complicated," I said, not ready to unpack the weight of my divorce, the betrayal that had left me cautious and contained. Jacob nodded, not pushing further. "Well, there's no rule that says you can't start again." When I returned to San Francisco after that weekend, something had shifted. I found myself looking at familiar streets with new eyes, noticing details I'd walked past 1,000 times without seeing. The camera Jacob had helped me learn to use became a constant companion, a way to stay connected to that feeling of awakening I'd experienced in Yosemite. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Leading another workshop in Point Reyes next weekend. Different scenery, same bad jokes. Spot open if you're interested. Jacob." I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes, my practical side listing all the reasons I should politely decline. The age difference, the geographical distance, the fact that I had a mountain of work waiting for me, the lingering fear from my last relationship. Then I thought about Jacob's question by the campfire. What do you love? I signed up for the Point Reyes workshop, and then one in Big Sur. Each time, Jacob and I would find ourselves lingering after the others had gone, talking until the stars wheeled overhead. He never pushed, never presumed, but I could feel something growing between us, fragile and unexpected. It was during the Big Sur trip that everything changed. We were photographing a sunset from a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the sky ablaze with colors that seemed too vivid to be real. The workshop had ended hours ago, but Jacob had offered to show me this special spot, accessible only by a trail he'd discovered years before. This is my favorite place in the world, he said quietly, as we watched the sun sink toward the horizon. I've never brought anyone else here. I turned to look at him, really look at him, and found him already watching me, his expression open and unguarded. In that moment, with the vast ocean before us and the sky painted in impossible colors, the difference in our ages, our backgrounds, our lives, none of it seemed to matter. Eleanor, he said, my name like a question on his lips. I don't know who moved first. Maybe we both did. But suddenly, his arms were around me, and we were kissing as the last light of day faded around us. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. That was the beginning. What followed has been the most unexpected chapter of my life. Weekends spent exploring remote trails, Jacob patiently teaching me to rock climb despite my initial terror, evenings cooking together in my San Francisco apartment or his rustic cabin near Yosemite. I've learned to embrace spontaneity, to find joy in the unplanned moments. Just last month, Jacob convinced me to call in sick on a Wednesday so we could chase the perfect light for a photograph he'd envisioned. The old Eleanor would have been horrified at such irresponsibility. The new one found herself laughing as we raced against time, the wind in her hair. Of course, it hasn't all been sunset kisses and breathtaking vistas. There have been challenges. Raised eyebrows from colleagues when they meet my younger partner, my own insecurities flaring up at unexpected moments, the practical difficulties of building a relationship between my city life and his wilderness one. And then there's the ghost of my marriage to Aaron, a shadow that sometimes falls between Jacob and me. The night I finally told Jacob about the affair that ended my marriage, about finding those messages on Aaron's phone, and the cold, clinical way he'd explained that he'd outgrown our relationship, I was certain it would change how Jacob saw me. Instead, he held me as I cried, then gently lifted my chin. Thank you for trusting me with your pain, he said. But you should know that I see it as part of your strength, not your weakness. Jacob has never tried to fix me or offer empty platitudes about moving on. Instead, he's simply been present, accepting all the complicated layers of who I am. In return, I've learned to appreciate his restless spirit, his need for open spaces, even when it means adjusting my own expectations of what a relationship should look like. Last week, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the fog roll in over the Golden Gate Bridge, Jacob asked me what I was thinking. That I never expected this, I admitted. You, United States, any of it. He smiled, taking my hand. The best photographs are the ones you didn't plan for, he said. The ones that happen when you're open to the moment. I'm not naive enough to believe that love solves everything, or that age gaps and different lifestyles don't present real challenges. I don't know what the future holds for Jacob and me, but for the first time in a very long time, I'm not trying to plan every detail. I'm learning to embrace the uncertainty, to find beauty in the spaces between plans. This morning, I woke before dawn to find Jacob already up, camera in hand, capturing the first light breaking over the city. He didn't notice me watching him from the doorway, completely absorbed in his work. 14 years younger than me, with his whole life ahead of him, and yet so present in each moment that it makes me ache. Come here, he said suddenly, without turning around. You need to see this. I crossed the room and stood beside him, following his gaze to where the golden light was transforming ordinary buildings into something magical. He wrapped an arm around my waist, and I leaned into him, thinking about all the mornings I'd witnessed this same sunrise alone, too preoccupied with the day ahead to really see it. Beautiful, I whispered. Jacob turned to me, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Eleanor. It always has been. You just needed to slow down enough to notice. And he's right. About the sunrise, about life, about love coming when you least expect it. At 44, I'm still learning how to see the world, how to see myself. And for now, that's enough.